Dr. Hollen, and thank you for joining me for another amazing interview. For the month of January, we are focusing on empowering women. We're doing this in support of the Women of Iron experience. There's a couple events coming up in January, so be sure to click the link for more information on that, and we'll have events throughout the year. That is designed for entrepreneurial females that want to have extreme clarity, regain their power and expand their power instead of leaking it out and losing their power and their voice. So we really want to empower you so that you can have a greater impact. Now for the men listening up, don't ignore these. You can share these with your friends and family and probably implement a few things yourself. And we are going to be Rain and Man in March, so stay tuned for this amazing interview. Welcome back for the interview. I have the amazing Dr. Heather Denniston with us. I've known her for a few years now, 2 or 3 years, I believe, through the LCW. Now, Dr. Denniston is a seasoned chiropractor. She's an author and a speaker, and she's the producer of the Junk You Should Know show, which is really, really cool show. Be sure to check that out. And a program I'm excited to really dive in today. It's for women over 40 in particular. It's called the Change Cave. Now, Dr. Denniston, do I call you Dr. Heather, Dr. Denniston? What do you want me to call you?
How about just Heather? Would be awesome.
All right, that sounds good. So let's chat about your genius in the space of empowering women today. Now, I know that you're an expert on bridging that connection between wellness and also remaining productive and effective with success in our lives. Can you fill in the gaps and tell us a little bit about yourself, but also how you arrived at a place with so much passion for wellness?
Yeah, you bet, Hollen. So as you mentioned, I've been a chiropractor for 25 years. I left brick and mortar practice a couple of years ago. I still see some patients in my home. As you know, we can't keep our hands off people. So, but the primary focus of my work now is twofold. I focus on speaking to corporations about sort of bridging that connection between wellness and their employees' productivity, success, and effectiveness. You mentioned that. But my passion is definitely with women, and particularly women over 40 who are ready to take that next step to whatever wellness aspiration they want to gear after. And so that's exciting to me. And sometimes I get questions about, well, you know, like you're saying, why are you so passionate about this? Why are you so excited about it? Well, when I was about 9, I grew about 6 inches in a year. And
okay.
It was like a Mastiff puppy, and Mastiff puppies don't do back handsprings on the beam, and I was a competitive gymnast, so I quit.
Wow.
And instead I focused on my other sport, which was competitive binge eating. And so I became a professional binge eater. I topped out at about 235 in college and found myself one day standing in the shower, overweight, inflamed. I acquired thyroid situation, Raynaud's, arthritic condition, and my health was in the dumper, and I was just standing there going, what the heck am I going to do? And I thought, you know what, I'm the only person who gets to change this. No one can do this for me. And so I went on a journey of discovering what is it to be truly healthy and truly well. And that actually took me into chiropractic. And after years and years of working with patients and clients and transforming kind of my situation around, that's what I still get out of bed, jumping out of bed in the morning saying, I want to affect other women's lives, help them along their journey, because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so much confusion, and it is discouraging for them. And so I want to provide that little beacon through the fog and say, hey, come on in. I can help you with this. And it's not weight loss per se. It's how do we want to be truly well? That's the bigger focus. And the side effects are those other things like, you know, weight regulation and that kind of thing. But we truly focus on the foundational principles in wellness.
I love that, because we all have different goals, right? And I hate saying this, but I love that you've been through that scenario that you had explained. Mm-hmm. I've been through a similar one in college. They say the freshman 10 or the freshman 15, and I allowed it to go well beyond that myself.
Yeah.
But you were able to relate to so many women given your backstory in this. And myself being on the brink of 40, what do you find are some of the, what do they struggle with most? I know you have the Change Cave, which is a program that you're speaking about for the women over 40, but what do you feel like women struggle with the most? What are we struggling with?
Yeah, you bet. That's a great question. So the Change Cave has been in place for a couple of years now. So I've had the chance to really tease out what those pain points are for women. And absolutely, after 40 is a much different scenario than in our 20s or our 30s. And after 40, it's about, holy, like, what just happened? My kids are leaving or have left, or I've got, you know, middle teenager kids. And I lost myself somewhere.
Yeah.
And so the idea of finding their passions again, the idea of carving out regular, consistent time for their self-care and understanding what self-care really is, because it's not a pedicure or a hot bath. It's a lot of deeper work that sometimes we need to do. And then they finally have maybe a little bit of discretionary time to look at, you know, their food plans and their exercise plans. They're at a point where they're like, okay, if I look in the mirror right now and I do nothing different, it's just going downhill from now. So I need to make changes. And in my opinion, we can make small, consistent changes that are for the long term that create great transformation. A 21-day this or a 30-day that is great, but that's not what I do. So we work on longer term, longer sort of transformational change. And I think a bigger, you know, hormones, sleep, weight distribution changes when we start hitting perimenopause and menopause. All of those things are big concerns, and relationships are a big concern for women over 42, because a lot of time, not all women, but many women are in a phase where they're kind of coming up from the throes of child rearing, and they're kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, I've let my friendships go a little bit. Maybe my relationship with my partner isn't as strong as it could be. So those are some of the pain points. And that's where the bridge comes in, because if we can be more healthy, more resilient, know how to integrate our stress better, we are eating so that our physiology is on point, and we are moving in a way that is flexible and energetic, our whole life will look different.
And you know what? We're built for that. We're made for that. For resilience,
100%.
for the power, and for the just what we stand for. We're designed for that. But so often along the way, we leak that power. You know, we leak who we are, what we like, what movies we even like, what food we like. You know, like you had mentioned, it gets lost a lot of times in the child rearing years, but sometimes lost in relationships, lost in your career. I know for a big part of my life, my value is based on the success of my practice and my career. And whenever that ended, it was almost, I can almost relate to women that have their children leave the house. Like, now what do I do? You know? And so you kind of lose yourself. And I love it, because around this time, you know, the 40s, it's almost like we wake up, you know, we get woke, as the kids say. And we wake up and we're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? You know, with my years, it's like you woke up one day looking a certain way, and you wonder how that happened. And I love, and I agree with you that, like, the 20-day challenges, 30-day challenges, those are great to, like, a
totally
jump start. It's good to kind of have a boost. But I love that you focus on the longevity of life.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what you said, Hollen, and I it takes me back to when we first met, and we were standing by the pool at a conference talking about leaving or shifting our focus from what we were doing in our career in a brick and mortar situation to something different. And there's a sort of a cleaving and a bit of a loss with that, and your identity kind of has to change and shift. And so that's a big part of what we talk about too. And how do we just, you know, create strength emotionally and physically under ourselves so that we can go into these next, you know, 4 or 5 decades and just kill it and crush it. And we have to be well to be able to do that.
I love it. I love it. Now, in the Change Cave program, you've got a part that focuses on discovering your wellness why, which I love that whole concept. Can you share a few tips with us to help women maybe gain more clarity or regain their voice and their power back in their lives instead of giving it away and leaking their influence?
You bet. I found over a couple of decades of working with people that, and maybe you found this in your practice too, that you would give recommendations and they'd be like, yeah, and then they'd come back and they didn't do them, and they didn't do them, and they didn't do them, even though they know, like, those are good things for me to be doing. And I figured out it's because they don't have a deep enough why behind what they're doing. They don't have, it's my reason, not their reason. So I developed this thing called Discovering Your Why, and it's the first thing we do in the Change Cave. Basically, it's the price of entry. You have to go through this process. And I'll tell you just a very quick story about this woman named Julie. I was running a workshop in a corporate situation, and we were doing a Discover Your Wellness Why. And the idea is you write the very first thing that comes to mind about why do you want to be well? Write it down. And then you start whying it down. So you say, yeah, but why? And so then you take your next sentence and your next sentence, and you just keep winding down until you finally get to something that's kind of heart clenching or even brings a tear to your eye. And so I walk around the table, and Julie is there, and she's about a 65-year-old woman. She's getting close to retirement, and she's got one line, and she's sitting and she's looking around. And I said, "Oh, Julie, are you done?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm totally done." I said, "Well, what's your why?" And she goes, "Well, because I want to be active when I'm older." No emotion. And I said, "But why?" "Well, because I want to be able to do the things I want to do." "But why?" "Because I want to have great relationships with my family and be able to, do the things that they want to do." "But why?" And she stopped for a second, and it took her a minute. She looked me right in the eye, and I get goosebumps every time I tell the story. She goes, "I don't ever want to tell my 2 grandsons, Noni can't do that." And I'm like, oh, and I'm like, that's it. That's the one. Because if I'm getting goosebumps, she clearly, that's it. That's an emotional piece for her. She doesn't want to lose out on any moment she can have and enjoy with her grandsons. Then I'm like, that's it, Noni.
That's so, I always say, like, get 5 to 7 layers deep, like really work on it.
And it takes some time. I have one client, it's an emotional place for her to go because there's a lot of baggage wrapped up in wellness in her family. Her mother was a manic depressive and an alcoholic. Her father was an alcoholic. And there's a lot of fear there around digging into why she wants to be well. So it is not easy for everybody to go through the process. And so that definitely is sort of the gateway into having better success with a lot of your wellness aspirations that you're going after.
Absolutely. I've noticed the same even with my patients. As we get started, I make sure we dig deep enough before we even take them on as a patient, right? To make sure that there's something deeper than just showing up for an appointment and me doing the work.
Yes, yes.
So now you have talked about quite a bit of wellness, and we know that we want to achieve wellness because that involves fending off those chronic and debilitating disease processes, right? So can you elaborate a little bit more? I want to dig into your why a little bit as far as what fuels your passion to encourage people to express their full potential in wellness.
Yeah. Well, getting a little personal here, Hollen. My dad was diagnosed with brain cancer, and he died 6 months later. And that was a huge loss for me. Well, a few years later, my mother got a diagnosis none of us could believe, and it was brain cancer. And my sisters and I stood in the hospital going, how is this even possible? And luckily she beat it, but only to succumb to a different kind of cancer a few years later. Now, you might think I'm going down the path of my wellness is that I want to prevent cancer. It's not at all. What it is that is a lot of those big monsters are preventable. So your diabetes, cancers, and heart disease, absolutely. But my purpose behind my wellness why is I look at their lives and I think, did they live to the fullest? Not knowing when their time was going to come, did they live to the fullest? And absolutely not. My mother spent a lot of time stuffing feelings and not talking about it. She spent a lot of time hating her body, and she spent a lot of time not going after dreams that she had. My dad never, processed emotion well. He was not a fit man. He was not a healthy man. And I look at that and I think, you know what? Wellness choices, yes, they have the side effect of helping you prevent all those things, but more importantly, it helps me have a better relationship with my husband. It helps me look at a sunset a little differently. It helps me smell flowers in a more incredible way than I ever thought possible. And so that's the fuel behind what I do, is I want a life experience that is full color, not black and white, and I want that right now.
I love, love, love that. So many people focus on the end game and not getting there. It's inevitable, right? So
Yes.
I love that while you're here, let's do it at 1,000%. And boy, with your activity level and how your energy, I just love your energy too, by the way. You
Oh,
get
thank you.
your full color of life, you give that to people whenever you interact with them. So thank you for having that impact on my life.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And Hollen, one thing people don't realize when I'm speaking in corporations, a lot of times what I'm working with is the employers wanting to level up their leadership. And one of the things that they don't connect is that pizza that you ate on Sunday affects how you function in the boardroom on Wednesday. The exercise you did on Tuesday is going to, affect how you go on a business trip and how effective you are. And it's that bridge where people are like, oh my gosh, I never thought about that is so intimately connected.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think it's really important that we share that message that, yes, it's important to prevent all of those nasty things that can come from bad life choices, but it's also really important to have a full life expression and experience and be at your absolute best every single moment of, that you can.
Yes, I love it. I love it. Now, one thing I'm excited about, because you had mentioned kind of in our pre-interview talk, is you have a gift for our listeners. Tell us
I do.
a lot about that.
Presents.
We love free stuff.
Yeah. So I put together a Discover Your Wellness Why PDF that is complimentary to your listeners. And all they need to do is click the link that you give them, and they can get going on their own personal wellness why and go through that discovery process. And in coming up with that final statement, that will help them as they project some of their goals for 2020 or their intentions that they're setting. And it'll help really put some rocket fuel behind the forward motion that they want to see.
I love that. And it is rocket fuel. A lot of people skip this step because it's tedious work. Like they just want to get started. Just give me the plan,
Yeah.
And so I just want to remind people how important this is and how generous she is to share this with us at no introductory cost. So be sure, I'm going to put the link in the show notes and the comments below. So be sure to click that link as well so that you can get started. What a perfect time being January and all things new, right? So
Right.
get started with that free gift from Heather. And what are some final thoughts or encouragement or tips that'll empower our listeners today as we wrap up?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things two things. One is I'm really into this whole concept of resilience now. And what I'm seeing with my clients is that it has so little to do with um, the forward motion. It has to do with the fall, because we all fall, right? So we all fall off. It's how quickly do we bounce back up, and what do we need to do to make sure we bounce up quickly? And what are the ways we invest in that so that we can get back up and get back on my meal planning because it's never linear. We always have shifts and falls. And so how do we create the shortest amount of time possible that we're off the train? And so that's number one. And number two is consider your incompatible stories. So I always talk about good versus should goals. Like a lot of people are like, oh, I should lose weight. I should start exercising. Well, those are should goals. Those are somebody else's goals. They're clearly not yours. So don't do them. Don't commit to them.
Wow.
Find out what your own goals are. And if it's not losing weight or it's not getting fit, find some sort of wellness thing that you can attach your energy to. And the second piece of that is be careful about an incompatible story. My sister has these famous New Year's resolutions that never come to fruition. Famous. And she lets me share the story. And what we discovered is that, she's 54 and she wants to be fit. She wants to, really get strong. But the story in the back of her head is you're a chronic pain sufferer. You've never been an athlete. You have failed at this so many times, and you're just going to get in more pain if you do this. And it just goes on and on. And so we have to tune into what are some old stories that may be pushing you to fail every time you set these goals, and rewriting those. So resilience and checking your incompatible story before you ever kind of set sail for what your new, intentions or goals are for the time period.
Yeah, I'm so glad you touched on that, because so often these conversations are all about, raw, like, let's move forward. How do we progress? It's all the positive side of things, but more people relate to the fall.
Mm-hmm.
More people don't get started and stop setting goals because why get started if we're just going to fail again? That's, you know, the story in the back of the head that you had mentioned. And I think all of my listeners probably relate to this nugget more than probably anything that we've even said, aside from the why. That's super important. But knowing, because so often they fail, and I've even seen this in some of my groups, my health and wellness groups on Your Health Revolution, when they fail, they stop showing up.
Yes.
You know, and they then retreat to isolation, whether they're embarrassed or whatever the story that they're telling themselves now, right? And so just to be able to kind of pick yourself back up, you know, and expect not to be perfect, and that's okay. You know, in the world we live in today, it's everything's so fast and everything's so perfect on this Facebook, Instagram world.
Yes, of course.
Own your story, be true to your story, and really investigate that, discover that. And
those are all, like you say, they're as important work as just about anything else. It's as important as doing your meal prep on Sunday is doing this kind of work. And so that's, I think, been a missing link for a long time, and why a lot of people are super frustrated.
Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing that missing link and how to bridge that connection from wellness to actually being productive and successful. So thank you so much. Before I let you go, tell us how our folks can find you.
Yeah, you bet. My across all platforms is Well Fit and Fed. I'm probably most active on Instagram and Facebook, and then we house the Junk You Should Know show on the YouTube channel. So if you want to check out the show, you can head over there. But I know Hollen will put a link to the Change Cave if you want to learn more about that as well.
Absolutely. We'll be putting all that information down so that people can access you very easily. So thank you so much, Heather, for joining us today. And thanks to all of our listeners for joining us. We are here to empower you. If this message touched you, I want you to share it with your friends and family and really have that impact on other people's lives, because that's what we're here for. Thanks for joining us. Stay classy, folks.